know, no one has taken out nomination papers to run for school committee. So I'm saying this to the broader audience out there, that if you have any interest in this, if you'd like to ask any questions, please feel free to get in touch with any one of us. But we really, really hope that somebody does decide to run for those seats. On another note, I had a conversation this week with Senator Ives and her budget person regarding the situation that we find ourselves in. And while it isn't necessarily going to affect anything right now, there are some things that we can do and I think we should do going forward. And she sent me some copies of some legislation she has filed that are relevant to some of the things that we have concerns about. So I will circulate those to everybody on the committee. One thing she said that was very important is that when the hearings are held for these bills, that we show up. If we don't show up, would we at least send letters? Because that makes a huge difference. So she's going to let me know when the hearings are for each of these specific bills that she has filed. Okay. Student representatives report.
Hi, everyone. Today is Wednesday, March 11th, and with spring right around the corner, we are officially entering the beginning of the end, as they say, with only a few months of school remaining. Yesterday, progress reports were issued through Aspen, marking the halfway point for the third quarter. As for seniors, less than 10 school weeks remain, and graduation is on the horizon. I'd like to begin by mentioning that last Thursday through Sunday, the drama department performed their spring musical, Leader of the Pack, which was a huge success according to Miss Reardon. This past weekend, we also had some pretty spectacular athletic accomplishments. Congratulations to senior Luke Boyle, who won the New England Wrestling Championship at North Andover High School on Saturday night. Also, congratulations to the Triton cheerleaders, who also had a successful weekend, earning second place in the state tournament. As for this week, the District Arts Festival is tomorrow for students in grades 5 through 12. Both the band and chorus will put on several performances, and there will be an art exhibit in the library at 5 p.m. And then on Thursday, 51 high school students will be leaving to participate in the DECA State Competition in Boston. This is a weekend event, and the DECA students have shown well in past competitions, so we wish them the best in their events this weekend. For Friday, March 13th, all the advisories will be meeting in the gym for a mini school rally, and then on Monday, March 16th, spring sport tryouts begin. This week of March 16th, there will be student course registrations for 2015-2016 year. On Monday, there will be assemblies for all grade levels tailored to the specific classes that will highlight key aspects of the registration process. During the next 2 weeks, teachers and students will be discussing course selections and recommendations. And then Monday night, the drama classes will give a public performance of the play which they presented at the High School Drama Festival, Charlie Foster. And then Wednesday, March 18th, the foreign language will have their National Honor Society induction ceremony. And on March 20th, we'll have the Mr. THS competition, which is sponsored by the senior class. Tuesday, March 31st, is the MCAS ELA testing, which will be for sophomores and will continue through until Thursday. And then the following Wednesday will mark the 1st of April. Typically, spring sports have their first games during this week, but game schedules have been altered to fit the stubborn winter snow. And then Friday, April 3rd, we have a half day for the holiday, and Tuesday, April 7th, is the long-awaited Credit for Life fair for the juniors. And then, while it's difficult to believe, Friday, April 10th is the end of the third quarter. So our next meeting will be Wednesday, April 8th. Please let me know if you have any questions.
Does anyone have any questions on the student? Dina?
I don't have a question. I just have a comment. My husband and I went and saw the play Friday night, and I think by far that was my most favorite production they did. It was so well done. I did email Shay and Sue and Holly telling them that that was just fabulous, and that's the caliber we have here, and that's just so nice to see.
Anyone else have any comments for Shannon? All right, thank you very much. The next item on our agenda is the final FY16 operating budget. And just to give a brief recap of the last few weeks, we have had meetings where we listened to the public. We had our hearing, and anyone who had any information or input for the budget was welcome to come in and speak. We also have met with the elected and appointed officials from the 3-member towns, the selectmen, the finance committee people, to get their input on the projected budget that we had approved as a tentative budget. And last week we had our meeting before this meeting. We met with the town officials again and listened to what they said and what they heard, and have made additional changes to what you saw perhaps even recently as a week ago. So I am going to make a motion to approve the general operating budget, and then we will open it up for discussion. I'd like a motion that the school committee approve an FY16 final general operating budget as detailed, with expenditures totaling $37,824,311, resulting in an operating assessment of $8,946,255 to the town of Newbury, $8,714,655 to the town of Rowley, and $10,098,997 to the town of Salisbury.
So moved.
Could we have a second? Monique seconded. Is there any discussion on that?
Based on the papers we received today, that I think we need to kind of announce what the cuts are to get to this point. We have this information in our hands, but the public does not have it. So I'd like to ask the superintendent and assistant superintendent to go through the changes since our last meeting and outline the cuts that have been made. You may.
Eventually be more discursive than usual, and possibly more anecdotal. I recently had an exchange with people who were interested in the fact that 3 attorneys are looking to litigate the fact that there's a cap on charter schools, and I shared some thoughts. And from one of the people with whom I shared my thoughts, I got the rather sharp reply, "Dream on." And of course, it's not very long since we got past Martin Luther King Day. We actually have a collective dream. It's called our vision. It is a kind of organizational dream. And the opening lines say that we will be a community of learners known for our unwavering commitment to meeting the needs of all students. And recently I shared on 2 occasions a quotation from Jonathan Kozol, author of Amazing Grace. And in this book he has the following: "A dream does not die on its own. A dream is vanquished by the choices ordinary people make about real things in their own lives." Vanquished by the choices ordinary people make about real things in their own lives. And if you think about who are going to make the choices about this budget, certainly the school committee have responsibilities to exercise choice this evening. Town leaders will have the opportunity to exercise choice in terms of their leadership or not in favor of the budget, in influencing their citizens. Citizens will have choice at town meetings. At the state level, state representatives will have a choice about whether they represent or lead in terms of their reaction to the governor's budget. So I think it's important that we recognize that there are a lot of choices to be made about the budget. And if we think for a moment about how people think about the budget, we tend to talk about costs rather than investment. I often remind myself of a phrase from Oscar Wilde. Nowadays, people know the price of everything and the value of nothing. Nowadays, people know the price of everything and the value of nothing. Lines written in 1891. In response to a message I put out to faculty and staff recently, the question was raised, people can't afford to do it. And one of them immediately wrote back saying, or cannot afford not to do it, because the author of the message recognized the importance of what we're about. That's reflected in part of the budget papers, where it says the school committee also believes that there are powerful connections between a quality education system, the life chances of individuals, the economic well-being of the community, and the functioning of an active and informed democracy. So we're here in a sense to talk about dollars and programs and positions, but there is a much larger agenda here than simply the budget. It's really about the kind of community that we want to be. Mrs. Williams invited me to say, well, how do we get here? Certainly I had questions, and I sent a message out to staff and faculty today explaining that this is something that has come upon us very quickly. The question was asked, could essentially a more attentive administration have predicted what has happened over the past several months? And I don't want to appear defensive, but the story looks a little bit like this. Special education costs have been growing over the year, $446,000. Salaries were negotiated with the teachers and the instructional aides quite a while ago. They were known. The utility increase of $293,000 was known in November, and that was a result of our having essentially to make a judgment about the way that energy costs were moving. In our current contract, we were very fortunate when Brian sorted that out. We got a very good deal. The prices have gone back to the current contract levels. There's really nothing we can do about that. Transport we knew about in December 2014. That has to go out to bid. There were 2 bidders. In actual fact, when the bids came in, my recollection is that Brian had estimated the amount of the increase to within $17,000 on the $250,000 increase. Again, that's not something where we can sit round the table and negotiate. We have to go through a formal bidding process as prescribed by the state, and we really have no choice there. Health insurance, we knew on March 3rd. We had estimated, Brian has spent a lot of time talking with our consultants, and on the basis of the advice we were given, we pitched it at a midpoint in terms of the range that the industry was talking about at that time. We don't understand why. We came in at over 10% instead of 7.5%. We are still arguing the case, and that may not be final. But that, again, is not something that we can really negotiate easily. The Essex Regional Retirement contributions, it's only £91,000, but another body decides what that will be. We have no say in that whatsoever. We certainly had no say in the governor's budget, which reduced our revenue by $162,000 on March 4th. And of course, attached to the governor's budget are the calculations that the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education and the Department of Revenue undertake to calculate the minimum required contribution from each town, which relates to their assessment of average per capita incomes and property values. We don't know that. We don't have access to the figures. We just have to accept them when they arrive. Probably the only thing that we could have done was to pay more attention to declining enrollment over the past few years. And because enrollment has gone down, we have within virtually very small increases to the towns maintain personnel and reduce class sizes. We could have increased class sizes, but given that we had the funds to support small class sizes, and we know that if we take advantage of small class sizes in terms of our instructional practice, we can make a difference for students. So that was probably the one area of discretion that I and Brian have to plead guilty to. The story I'm describing is the release of information through November, through March 4th, really none of which we could control. And that put us in a situation where, particularly after March 4th, we were reacting to what was going on. If we look at the budget itself, I'm going to draw attention to one or two parts that weren't in the tentative budget, but are here now. If you look at page 3, we have again introduced municipal education-related financial data. And I think what's important here is the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5th line from the left, which is the mean family tax bill. And you will see that Amesbury, Beverley, Georgetown, Newburyport and West Newbury have higher tax bills than all our towns. And Danvers, Ipswich, Groveland and Merrimack have higher mean family tax bills than 2 of our towns. And so the question is, when we say we can't afford it, do we mean we can't afford it, or are we saying we choose not to afford it? Town assessments, Brian will talk about, but we have brought them down. The committee listened to representations that they received, and the last time the committee looked at the tentative budget, we had an average assessment increase of 4%. However, the spread was very considerable: 6.49% for Rowley, 5.7% for Salisbury, 1.12% for Newbury, who've lost 39 students, which is one of the big components in the swing. The budget, which is in front of the committee this evening, actually reduces the Newbury assessment by 0.53%. It reduces Rowley's from 6.49 to 4.63, and Salisbury down from 5.7 to 3.93. And to achieve that, we've had to make many more cuts in the budget, and in a minute or two, Brian will go through those cuts. The size of the impact of the governor's budget and the redistribution of assessment among the towns really made us go back to the drawing board and redesign the budget. So when you get to page 5, the budget design has changed somewhat. In particular, there are reductions in the administrative staff in the district office who support curriculum instruction and assessment, and there's a reduction in the administration of the high school. And people often talk about these positions, often not knowing what they actually do. I've been in a discussion recently about the status of the district in terms of differentiating instruction. And in a situation where some high school teachers are arguing that we should reintroduce CP1 classes, I have to conclude that we're not ready yet to abandon helping people to broaden their instructional repertoire to engage all students. Indeed, the holder of that position has been approached by really quite senior staff in the high school, seeking guidance on how best to handle some of the students that they have. A lot of the work of the district office staff goes under the radar. It's not something that is reported on in public, but certainly without those positions, we would not have been able to provide the support for things like the math program committee or specialist DDM development, just to give some examples of the kind of things that we have been doing, or indeed supporting math specialists. And as far as the high school is concerned, I'm concerned that there's a heavy burden of evaluation these days, and with fewer administrators, that means that those remaining have got a bigger caseload of evaluation. The math program is highlighted in here. It's highlighted because in discussions that we've had with the elementary school principals and hearing what their teachers have been saying to them, that there is certainly a need, K-8, for us to provide teachers with a math program that is aligned with a state framework that was adopted in 2011. I well understand that people who are not working in that sector may not be experiencing the difficulties that elementary school teachers in particular are having in responding to the new framework, but certainly there's a significant body of support in that area. One other thing that I want to mention is that when you look at the budget, you will see that we've cut after-school transport, but we have retained some capacity for Salisbury. People may say, well, that's not fair. But if we think about the proximity of Salisbury to this campus, and we think of young children attending after-school programs in Salisbury, many of whom come from families that have serious family challenges, it seems to me right to ensure that those children have access to after-school programs, not least because there's plenty of research that tells us that access to quality after-school programs helps to develop students generally in terms of their academic progress. Before I hand it over to Brian, I do want to recognize that we were waiting until after 5 o'clock yesterday evening to find out whether the teachers were going to give up a professional development day. Giving up a professional development day also involves giving up a day's salary. I'm very pleased that the teachers are supporting what we're trying to do. They agreed to give up the professional development day and the salary associated with that, and I wrote to them this morning thanking them. I want to make it clear I'm very unhappy with the situation that we are in. In fact, it makes me really quite angry that we find ourselves in a situation contemplating the kind of reductions in personnel in particular that we are looking at. So I want to leave you, before I hand you over to Brian and the dollars, with a line from a poem, or 2 lines from a poem by Dylan Thomas. Do not go gentle into this good night. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. Thank you. Brian, the dollars.
A heck of an introduction. First of all, let me point out on the cover, as I'm sitting here staring, this is not the month of March, it's the month of March, so I apologize for that typo. I'm not going to go through the line items in detail for each of the locations. If there are questions, I'm more than happy to go through any of those lines and answer questions about them. But taking you through the document, On page 6, where we start with the adequate budget request, we added pages to this without removing. So what you have is pages 6 through 11 still show what the adequate budget would have been. We then have what a level services budget would have been. Would have been a $2.4 million increase, almost 6.6% increase. The following page should look familiar. These are the changes. Pages 13 and 14 outline the changes that were made from a level services budget to arrive at a tentative figure. And now, the addition of page 15, which is where I'll focus, outlines changes from the tentative budget. So it needs to be clear here that only changes that are outlined on this page have been made to the tentative budget. So we haven't given up those cuts to trade for these cuts. These are in addition to the cuts that were outlined in the tentative budget. So to walk through, I should add some of these are additions in expenditure, not just cuts, but I'll quickly take you through the list. As Christopher had mentioned, we came at a 10.9% increase on our renewal. We had projected that at close to 150,000. However, there were some changes in the enrollments with new employees being hired. People come onto our insurance, come off of our insurance. People make changes as they turn age 65 onto retiree plans. So there was a slightly favorable change in our enrollment that saved us about 30,000 of that increase that we thought we were going to assume. As Christopher mentioned, he listed it as a loss of revenue. The charter school, we pay the tuition out of the 9,000 series in our budget. We then get a reimbursement from the state. It used to be a situation where the first year a student, we get 100% reimbursement, and then it kind of laddered down. It now is 100% for the first year and 25% for years 2, 3, 4, and 5. This is the result of, number one, they're prorating the reimbursements, they're reducing the total reimbursement, but also a number of our students who fell out of that 100% reimbursement into that 25% reimbursement category. So we net this we don't show this as a revenue, we net the revenue with the expenditure and budget that as the expenditure line in the 9,000 series along with our out-of-district tuitions in choice. We've been receiving a full day K grant to this date. There is a budget line called they call it the Extended Day Kindergarten Expansion Grant. The kindergarten expansion line at the state covers 2 grants. There was a lot of confusion, but the quality full day K program is being dismantled. The theory, I should say the explanation from the state is that I think the figure is close to 85% of districts are offering full-day kindergarten. And if you offer it without a tuition, you're getting the benefit of additional Chapter 70 money because you get that additional half-time. For a half-time kindergarten, we get a half-time FTE per pupil. For a full day, we get a 1.0, unless we're charging them. But for us, because we're spending above foundation, which takes us back into the whole discussion about foundation's too low, so there's an inherent problem, we could add 200 new kindergarten students and it would not affect our Chapter 70 figure. So that's the explanation. It doesn't work. Dental insurance, a one glimmer of hope where we went back 2% in our rates, saving close to $44,000. In the budget line, I had upped the cost of our Medicare match. So the district pays, obviously, district employees, public employees are not paying Social Security, but we are paying the Medicare half of that FICA tax. And so that is our other half of that match. That is purely driven by payroll. Projections a few months ago looked like it needed to be higher. We're trimming it back. That may be aggressive, but we're going to do it. In the tentative budget, there was an adjustment of a 1 FTE out that raised the tentative budget up 35,200, so that cut is restored. So it's a total of 5 FTEs, 25 sections, but 5 full-time equivalent teachers from the high school now. We did have an additional K-6 retirement, and to answer the question, obviously it saves more than $33,703. That's the difference. We had already assumed this isn't a new cut, but one of the teachers we assumed would have to reduce and pay unemployment. Now that's going to be a retiree, so we save the full salary rather than having to set aside unemployment costs. So that's an additional savings of $33,000 and change. We did learn of one more high school retirement, and the hope is to move one of the RIFs into that position and save a layoff and allow that person to hold that position. That's a work in progress, I think is a fair statement to say. We're assuming the reduction of 3 instructional assistants. At this point, where they are is day-to-day movement. But IAs in this district are either in a preschool class, they're in a kindergarten class, or they're a special education instructional assistant. We don't have regular education instructional assistants outside of pre-K and K. So this would be the ability to remove 2 positions based on needs outlined in IEPs. There are the next 2 lines, the 2 positions we've been talking about, the curriculum assessment coordinator and the differentiation specialist. Both of those positions are reduced in this iteration of the budget. The $36,000 in savings, there is, outside of paying for a portion of 2 teacher salaries, the balance of the Title IIA, which is teacher quality, what's the name of the grant title? Teacher quality. It's basically a maintaining low class sizes and teacher quality professional development entitlement grant. The theory here is $36,000 of that grant that's available would be used to offset other items that we would have paid for out of the general fund. So it removes the ability to use for the other PD, and it would be existing systems that we'd be able to pay for, My Learning Plan, other items that we would charge off to the grant. The next line, no raise senior administrators, that is the 4 central office and the 5 principals, will forego a raise in this coming school year. At the high school, there's a reduction of 1 administrator. That has not been determined, the specific position that would be reduced, but that has to be assumed to arrive at the numbers we're looking at here. As Christopher mentioned, the teachers did agree to 1 less workday to go from 183 to 182. That saves close to $100,000 in next year's budget. The term safe passage is, the concept is to leave lights on half-mast, if you will. So if we're able to put in a hallway, leave half the lights on so it's still passable, hopefully in the evening, turning them off more, but working with a consultant that we've used to do a lot of the lighting retrofits in these buildings, they have the exact fixture, and if we reduce lights by 45% in the hallways alone, it will save just a shave over $26,000 at our new, unfortunately, much higher rate that kicks in as of July 1. So we're assuming those savings. This does propose an increase in the parking fee. It doubles the parking fee. We collect about $15,000 a year, sometimes more, sometimes less. But this would double the fee to $360 or $2 per day. Working with Sean, it's certainly not ideal, but outside of the salary lines that are contractual raises for individuals and mostly coaches, the other lines, the biggest chunk of the increase was transportation of close to $35,000. Working with him, he believes that he can very reasonably save that money, whether it's shaving 1 or 2 games, road games away per season, per team. There are ways that each game can cost upwards of $1,500 to $2,000, depending on where we're traveling to with game officials and all the expenses. So that was not done without the athletic director's understanding. He was in full support of that. Again, as Christopher said, we're not supporting this wholeheartedly, but we believe we can make this work. The athletic fees increase. This is not a universal change in the cap. It is not a universal increase in the fees. This falls into line with what a lot of other school districts have done, which is the more costly sports, assessing a surcharge, if you will. So for us, Football is obviously much more costly with the size of the program, and swimming is much more costly because of the fact that we have to rent the pool space. Hockey tends to trump all of them because of the premium on ice time in this area. So the proposal is that football and swimming go to $450 and hockey goes to $550. This assumes less students than enrolled this past year, so there is a this is conservative. And then, as Christopher mentioned, we had a savings of, I believe it was $50,400. This puts about $13,000 of that back to run late buses at Salisbury Elementary only. That would be 3 days a week for the balance of the school year, not the first few weeks, not the final. So that reduces our total expenditures by an additional $445,534. The increase that we had shown in the tentative budget was $1,341,111. So that ends up with a net operating expenditure increase of $895,577 that you'll see on the top of page 16. There were some slight changes in the revenue as well. With changes in medical, remember, we budget for retirees to pay their portion of the medical into us, so that dropped revenues by a little over $1,400. We are assuming a loss of about $12,000 in our regional transportation. In recent years, that's been restored, that's come in higher, but we have to budget with what we know at this point. And then, as Christopher mentioned, the per pupil, we have for the last several years, and unless something drastically changes with the Chapter 70 formula, we will for the foreseeable future only get new Chapter 70 commensurate with the per pupil increase that they set as the minimum. Past several years have been 25. This year it's 20. We assumed the 25, so that's a loss of $13,000. So that takes the revenues from 201,600 down to 175,034. So if you turn the page, this is the assessment sheet that everyone's used to seeing. Again, if we turn one more page to page 17, the major culprit in the discrepancies with the formula this year are the minimum local contributions. I had made a statement, I don't know when, at the DCC meeting last week, as well as at the school committee meeting in regards to the effort reduction, which is a portion of the formula that basically looks to fund towns that are paying more than their share. The higher the percentage, the more the budget funds, the state funds what the amount the town is paying too much. This budget, the state budget, governor's budget, funds effort reduction at 45%. In the past several years, it's been 25%. I had mentioned that it was a factor in the significant swing in the minimum local contributions, in that enrollment was also a factor. I paid too much emphasis to the effort reduction, and this is driven almost primarily by enrollment this time. Several years back, there was a wild swing, and it was because they funded effort reduction at 100%. That certainly had a significant impact, and while the change from 25 to 45 did have an impact, it would be $10,000 to $20,000 as far as a swing in the assessments. The big piece is the fact that, as Christopher mentioned, Newbury went down 39 students, Rowley went down 15, and Salisbury went up 3. And after spending some significant quality time with Roger Hatch this week from the Department of Ed, the key is you can't look at this as a head count. It's not about a head count giving you a certain amount of revenue from the state. You have to look at it as a percentage of the pie. And when you have a more than a 1.4% swing in the total percentage of the student population from one town, that has big effects because that percentage is applied to that massive foundation budget. So the head count has a significant has a significant effect on the minimum local contributions. As Christopher mentioned, we can do things to mitigate that by the District Communications Committee has talked about going back to a 3-year rolling average or a 5-year rolling average. That being said, that would even have little impact. It would help, but it would be minimal because the state is going to use the actual year-to-year-to-year enrollment differences as of October 1st. And the reality is we're in a downward decline. We're in an incline in regards to people choosing our district. We have more students choosing and more families choosing into the district that are not residents. And we have less and less students choicing out and making a choice to attend another school district. But the reality is the population is just shrinking, and we're not unique. Urban areas are growing, and suburban and rural, more affluent areas are shrinking. So it is the reality, unfortunately, that I think we're going to face for the next several years. Somewhere in this packet, I believe you included the NESDEC report that shows going out 10 years, shows the district currently today at, where do we have us at, the 14-15, they show us pre-K to 12 at 2,778, going out to 2024-25, so out 10 years, they have us down 700 more students to under 2,100 students. So NESDEC is not the end-all be-all. They have fairly accurate projections, but they take birth rates, they take normal transiency and factor all those pieces in. So unfortunately, the reality is this is likely, hopefully we're not going to have this type of cuts, and I don't believe we're going to have this type of increase year after year. So that won't be a duplicate for next year, but I think the reality is the swing in the enrollment is going to happen. Whether it happens proportionately or disproportionately will mean the difference between a year like this and a year where the town assessments tend to come in north or south of a percentage point of the average. So I'm certainly happy to answer any questions. The rest of the document literally outlines by line all of these changes. You will notice the unemployment line has not increased because we're still assuming that savings offset in the salaries. So for now, we've left those, if you look on page 36, which is the last page of the regional programs, you see staffing changes cuts 321,000, spending changes cuts 15,000. So the cuts have been outlined in those lines, and especially because we don't yet know who the personnel are that are going to be laid off if this budget is passed. So we can't accurately move the money into the unemployment line. So that would happen in the adjusted fall budget when we do that in September. So I believe I've hit all the high points.
Before the committee discusses the budget, could I just explain why we stopped where we stopped? Because we were given a charge to try to reduce spending, to reduce the assessments, particularly to the towns most affected. And we looked at what we would do next. And if we look at the elementary schools, we could take a teacher out of Pine Grove, grade 1, push classes up to 22. We could take another out of grade 3 and push them up to 23, 24. Any other reductions out of elementary would have to come out of 3rd grade in Newbury, which would take classes up to 27, 28, or out of grade 4 at Pine Grove that would take them up to 27. And our view was that was too far. The middle school, as you know, has a team structure. Taking classes out of there begins to destroy that team structure. At the moment, classes are forecast to be 21, 22 in 7th grade and 23, 24 in 8th grade. If you take 2 teachers out of grade 7, the classes go up to 26, 27. If you take 1 out of 8th grade, they go up to 26, 27. And we felt that we had already done probably more than we would have wanted to in the high school. There really is nowhere else to go beyond people. And that's where we drew the line at that point and said, enough is enough. This is as far as we can reasonably go.
Does anybody have any questions for either Christopher or Brian?
And Deb, can I just say one more thing?
Sure.
You do have another sheet of paper that, as it was requested, to look at close to 4.5% and close to 4% increase to the highest, which is obviously we keep saying is Rowley. And as Christopher mentioned, to get to, it isn't an even 4.5, but to get to 4.38, it would be 2 more elementary teachers. And then to get to a 4% increase, which actually ends up being a 4.01, it would be 2 middle school teachers and 1 more high school teacher. So just to give you a sense of what would need to be cut to get to those figures.
Paul?
I just have a question about this high school administrator. This is just an observation that I have about the educator evaluation. My opinion of it, I think it's been watered down over the course of the last year in terms of the requirements of the administrators to perform their job. And my concern about cutting another high school administrator is, in the pilot program, I think has been pushed back. And again, I might be wrong on this, but it's just my perception, having sit through these meetings. I just don't know how Ms. Dorr and whoever else is left standing is going to be able to do the evaluations at the high school level. I mean, that really gives me cause for concern.
The numbers of teachers who high school administrators would evaluate would be roughly the equivalent of the workload of elementary school principal and assistant principal. Still too many in my judgment. It isn't visiting the classes that takes the time, it's writing thoughtful reports about what's been seen and having a conversation.
Anyone else?
Christopher, my question involves the curriculum coordinator. Now that's a position that is system-wide, and who is going to take the place, or who's going to do the job duties of that curriculum coordinator? Because that's a very important job in all schools, and we're going to be left without one. And I wonder if that's a good decision.
Well, she's sitting on your left. Right, sorry. Don't know my left from my right. My left. As of this morning, the role of the early years coordinator was really going in terms of overall responsibility to the chief academic officer. A key part of that, it relates to the early identification of students with special needs and making sure that receiving schools are well aware of the kind of challenges that students who will be enrolling bring with them. David, on my right, messaged us this morning to say he was willing to take that on. But clearly, a lot of things which are currently planned. For example, we were about to start a review of the social studies program. We're going to have to go back and look to see, reprioritize some of the things that we are doing. My worry is that the work around the curriculum instruction assessment involves quite a lot of grant work and quite a lot of accountability to the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. And I'm concerned that the Chief Academic Officer will spend too much time doing that and not enough time in helping us to improve the system as a whole. Kim, if you want to add anything, feel free.
Strategically didn't give me a microphone tonight. I think one of the things that concerned me with these changes is that we've made so many gains over the last 2 to 3 years. As I look at that district development plan, as I look at the literacy plan, as I look at that plan that people really thoughtfully put in everything that they thought they needed, that students needed, will be basically put on hold for hopefully a short time. That's not to say teachers are going to have to work extremely hard to continue to keep up with the momentum and some of the new changes and the initiatives that we have put forth in the district that everybody is happy about, that we're seeing results in what students are doing and the excitement that's building with the success. And so it's just very discouraging not to have that support at the administrative level, so that when we look at these 5 or 6 plans, and then we want to bring the social studies plan on board, and then we have the next generation science standards coming up, there's not much we can do with that, or I can do with that, because there's only so much I can do. There's only so much I can then say, are there any teachers that want to come after school to help? You know, and so, again, it's another layer for teachers then to have to pick up if we want to keep moving. So we have dedicated teachers in this district, and everybody will do what they need to do, because, as we know, people don't go into teaching for the money. They go in for the passion and the energy to help students learn. So it's just discouraging, and we will do our best, and I know we will rise to the challenge, but there are definitely going to be some initiatives and some progress that we'll have to stop, because we just won't have the man or woman power available to do it. Sorry.
Does anyone else have anything, questions, comments? Suzanne?
Brian, I'm assuming, I think I know this, but what was like the average increase to the towns? Like, I would say like the last 5 years. Like, what's our normal average increase to the towns?
Actually, last year the average was a 4, and it was fairly even. Everyone was north or south of a percentage point. The years before that, I believe the 3 years before that were significantly smaller. There was a 0.
Okay.
There was a 2 something. And I don't remember which year. If that was in the last 5, there was a year we went backwards.
So the year that we had like really good special ed savings that,
Yep.
okay.
Yep. So to have a 4 and change last year, and now to have it's the average is, we're back to a 2.66. You had the figure somewhere in one of the narrative versions that it was averaging around a percentage.
I looked at the past 5 years, last year, including the 4%, and the average over 5 years was about 2.5%.
I guess my concern is more of the enrollment that you gave us in that document. So if enrollment's going down, it's going to go down an average of 2.3% over the next 10 years. Is that, yeah, I guess, right? Or 2.4%, whatever it is. So if we're going down every single year that's projected, and we always have between a 2 and a 3% increase to our budget, are we always going to run into this every single year, that one town, just based on the numbers, is going to be lower than the other? And in lieu of what Mr. Farmer said about the taxes, as a school committee, if we have a town that's keeping its taxes pretty low, and not going for overrides, not increasing the average tax, mean family tax bill, I don't see how we can support a school long term like this. And I just don't know if that's reasonable for me to say, because if our enrollment's decreasing, we're not getting state funding, we're not raising our taxes, and the school committee just keeps going to the lowest figure for the lowest, the town, because they're going to, they fluctuate every year. I mean, sometimes this happens to Newbury, I think it happened to Salisbury once. So where do we draw the line of saying, this is our average increase to the budget, and, the cards fall where they may. I'm having a hard time always going down to the lowest town, and the town saying, well, I can't afford this. And so we say, okay, we'll make cuts. But it seems like we're getting into this cycle that this is going to keep happening. And
I think what everybody has to appreciate is that a reduction in student numbers doesn't mean to say there's a kind of linear relationship between student numbers and number of teachers you need, because we organize schools around classes. You don't take the number of students, divide them by an average class size and say that's how many teachers you've got. You work out how many classes you need to organize, and that tells you how many teachers you need. And then you look at the special education.
and do you see those numbers decreasing in the next 10 years according to these projections?
We're running into diseconomies of scale. There's no doubt about that. And if we want to maintain the same quality of education, it's going to cost relatively more per student to provide the same range of opportunities.
It's going to cost more per student to provide the same range of opportunities.
Yes,
So
our cost per student has gone up quite rapidly over the past 2 years as numbers have dropped. and we've tried
Right.
to maintain programs.
So if the tax base pretty much stays the same, it's not going to be supported.
No, no. And the other dimension is that we're doing well on school choice, and there's a neighbouring district that purports to be world class, and the people then make choices about leaving Triton because we're not able to provide the range of opportunities. So that beneficial swing in terms of school choice could turn around quite quickly.
Right, because if all of a sudden we have large class sizes, no one's going to pay to come here. And then we're going to lose all that money as well. So the only way to support our towns is to raise our tax base or vote for an override. But I just don't know where the cycle ends. I mean, we're trying to be, have a good relationship to the towns, but this, it might work this year, but I just don't see it being sustainable over the next, based upon the enrollment numbers, these enrollment numbers are scary.
And to just share, I certainly echo what you're saying. The issue this year is the swing. So if everyone was going down 15 students, we would not be seeing this. The issue is because Salisbury went up 3, Newbury went down just about 40. So it's that swing that's causing this wild swing. So if we were able to provide Newbury with the same level of assessment right now that we're going to give to Rowley and Salisbury, we could add 385 and 45. We could basically, that list of cuts, we could take that off the table, and we would land with everyone at the same assessment. So just to answer the question, I don't think there's this downward spiral where this is going to happen every year unless this population drop happens like this disproportionately. If Salisbury continues to grow and Newbury continues to shrink faster than Rowley is shrinking, then this is going to happen year after year.
Is there any way that they project that? Is there any besides this NESDEC?
We can probably tease that out with NESDEC a little more. They get the census data, and to be able to pull it out by town, we can certainly see if they can pull that out a little more. Obviously, the town has census information. And, to put it out there, popular or not, our regional agreement calls for a regional assessment formula that matches the statutory method. The state will allow, as long as the towns pass it unanimously, or all 3 towns approve it at town meeting, and the commissioner approves it, we could create an alternate assessment method. Whereas in any given year, if the swing is too wild, we decide to divide it by 3 and make it even. So that's possible, but that's a change to the regional agreement. Every year on the end of year report, I have to check off whether we assess the towns by our regional method or by the statutory method. I check both because it's the same thing. So that I don't know what the reasoning was when that was set up initially in 94, 95, but that limits our ability to have a second option. So that's throwing a whole nother ball of wax onto the table with the District Communications Committee, but that is a possibility. And that may be that that's a reality that has to happen so that we can do away with the swings. And when the state, maybe there's some agreement where when the state formula does this, then we have an alternate method.
In many ways, anybody who's planning a budget wants predictability.
Mm-hmm.
And towns want predictability, we need predictability. Brian's been describing an approach that might help us towards that.
Ina?
Thank you, Deb. I agree with you, Suzanne. This is disturbing. I think it's important to point out that this is not an adequate budget that we're proposing. It's not even a level services budget that we are proposing. Even if we go to the budget that's proposed right now, which is a 4.63%, basically to Rowley, since they are the one that would have the highest assessment. I'm really discouraged that we've come to this. This is one of the worst budgets that I've had to be part of since my 10 years on the committee. And it really bothers me that we're looking at personnel cuts, and like Kim has pointed out, this is programming that's going to be at least halted, if not eliminated. And as the superintendent has pointed out before too, once we cut something like this or cut programming, it's very hard to get it back. The proposals that were, are within this budget, I think the administration has given a lot of thought to. I know the members around this table didn't take this process lightly. But I think that the only thing that I can do in good conscience is to vote for this tentative budget as presented.
Robin?
Just to echo for a second what everybody said, this budgeting process is like two sides of a math equation, and we have no constants. At best, we might have them for 3 years, with a contract that we know we can predict what the increases will be. But other than that, we have no constants. I think that as depressing as this is to all of us sitting around the table, we have a resilient community. I think that there are a lot of wonderful employees in this district and administrators, and from our janitors to the superintendent of schools. As Kathy Norton said the other night, this is a very different place than it was 10 years ago. We have a lot to be proud of, and I think we need to stay calm and carry on. That this is a tough year, but this is not going to devastate Triton. We have great people here, and I think we'll move past it. We have a lot of work to do with the state. Boy, we need to lobby. There's a lot of work to do there. But I just ask us all to stick together to get through this. I hope that those big contracts that we settled that are 3-year contracts are going to provide some predictability in the next budget cycles so that we may not have the swings that we're seeing. But the swings are always going to be there, and the changes in enrollment are going to happen, and towns need to be prepared for that. I mean, if Salisbury is growing and it has more students, they're going to pay for more students. And if Newbury is shrinking and really is shrinking, I mean, those are just things that we all have to be prepared for, too. It's almost absurd that I'm even going to bring this up, given the magnitude of everything, but there is a possibility that we'll see a few extra dollars come back our way as the state finalizes its budget. One of the things in these proposed cuts that jump out to me as totally obnoxious is increasing student parking fees. And I know you might be thinking, really, compared to a teacher or whatever, but really on the backs of our students. I just think that is completely, so what I would like to propose is that we prioritize as the money trickles back in, if any of it trickles back in, where we'd like to see things offset, and I look to fellow committee members for that, but I really don't think we should be charging students additional money to park when our teachers don't pay to park, I don't pay to park when I show up, the administrators don't pay to park. Really? And then the next thing I'd like to see reduced, if and when any money comes back, is the additional charges for athletic fees, because we have athletic teams that are just really wonderful and making great strides and bringing a lot of pride to Triton. And I'd like to see kids be able to continue to participate and not have to because of the cost.
I would just like to say that I would like to see, if money comes in, is some of the late buses returned as well. I think families depend on those for kids to stay after school to get academic help or the programs after school. So that is, and I echo everything that everybody says. I mean, we haven't even brought up the unfunded mandates that the school has to pay. You know, there's just many things that the school district does that I think a lot of parents don't understand. You know, a lot of it, we don't understand some of the formulas that come on too. So I think the administration, as well as people around the table, have really thought about the cuts. I know that the cuts at the high school may cause some of our students who choice in to choice back out. it may cause some of our students who are here to choice out. And as Robin has said, I echo what she says, is we all need to stick together and figure out how we can try and adjust the swings to minimize the assessments being so disproportional. Thanks.
Anyone else?
I have to say, I'm struggling with the cutting of that curriculum coordinator position because I think this district has made great strides academically, and you need coordination throughout the system to move it forward. And I think asking Kim to do this and the teachers is unreasonable. Most systems will have at least 2 or 3 of this position, and we'll be left with none. And I think it's going to be penny wise and pound foolish. I'd like to see maybe part of this position reinstated, maybe if we can't afford the whole thing, at least part of it. And I'd like to know if you think that's reasonable.
I'm not sure what you want.
Is it, if we can't have the whole thing, I would settle for a half. I don't know how other people feel about it, but I think this position is really important.
Suzanne?
Well, I didn't know if it was,
I don't-
if someone got a comment. I just don't want to, I have another question, but I just don't want someone to comment on back to it.
Can I just say, conceptually, if we had one position, it might look like a hybrid of 2 positions, and I don't know that it would be necessarily. Sorry, I seem to be running out of these tonight. Conceptually, it will be a hybrid, a mixture of 2 positions. We don't have a proposal, but I don't think it will be simply a matter of selecting one of the positions and saying that is the one that we need to manage to support Kim and the schools and teachers through the next year.
I just have another question. Do you think, based upon the projected enrollment, that these cuts would happen, next year, the year after, anyhow, if we had the original tentative budget? Say we kept the original tentative budget, would we be making these cuts down the road anyhow?
We'd certainly be making adjustments down the road, yes. I mean, we've been well aware that our numbers have been going down. I don't think that we were aware, till we got this report, that they were going to go down quite as far as the NESDEC projection suggests. But this downward slope is typical of many, many districts. It's, as Brian said, it's the urban districts that tend to be holding their numbers.
Last year we reduced 3 teachers at Salisbury Elementary, and it was not on the radar because it kept class sizes smaller. I think the fact is, would we be doing this anyway? Absolutely, but not 16 at a whack. It would not be like this. It would be happening more gradually anyway.
I'm going to go out on a limb here. I'm a school committee member, and I'm trying to do what's best for the schools. And I can't support this budget right now. I think the taxpayers should be paying for our parking fees. I think the taxpayers should be paying for athletic fees. I think this is a town problem, and it's a townspeople's problem. I think you need to raise your taxes, and I can't support this. I absolutely can't. And I know we're going to make cuts down the road, like you just said, but if we make cuts gradually, maybe we can make more educated decisions that will not hurt the district like it is this year. So, looking at the tax bills for Newbury, Raleigh, and Salisbury, compared to other towns, they're so low. And I think it's up to the townspeople to decide. I just can't support this budget. I'm going to vote no.
Can I make a comment? Suzanne, I understand what you're saying, and don't misunderstand me by me saying that I would vote for this tentative budget. It's with distaste that I do so. It's the only option that we have in front of us.
I disagree.
But
We are the school committee. I think we can bring whatever budget we want and let townspeople decide. Let the selectmen go for an override. Let the people vote it down or vote it up. That's democracy.
Oh,
And
I
just
agree with
can't-
you on that point. All I'm saying is that I think even from what we heard from Rowley, even if we vote this tentative budget, they're still looking at an override.
Good.
And I agree with you, our taxes are too low. I am a taxpayer in Newbury. I'm saying it too. I agree with you. But
Right, so
that's
where
not
does the
our
cycle
decision.
end? That's what I'm saying. Like, where do we stop this? This is going to happen over and over again. It is. And I feel that I'm going to put my foot down and say it has to stop sometime. Raise your taxes. Support the schools or not. Let the people choose.
But you realize that if we have to come back and redo this budget, we start with,
A 1/12 budget.
okay. And actually, Deb, maybe you should explain that, what that would mean.
I have several things in my head I feel like I should explain what that means. I'm going to go back to when we come to budget time, we talk about contacting our legislators, and I don't think it happens. I don't think people do that. I think everybody's here and everybody's upset, and it sounds good now, and it drops. A month from now, nobody remembers. And I want to remind everybody that that is a big, huge piece of the problem, that the education in this state ranks top of the country. But the state isn't funding it. It's pushing the burden back onto the cities and towns. So in defense of the cities and towns, I think we need to remember that. I understand the tax base. I get that. I myself thought of, yes, because I had some conversations with other members about the budget, and we could just go for overrides. But in my opinion, we need to do what is best for the students of this district, and right now I feel it would be reckless to risk having to come back and do this over again. I feel that would be reckless. Our task is we need the budget to pass in 2 out of 3 towns for it to take effect. And I just think that the devastation that could happen by a reckless move to dig our heels in right now would not be helpful to the students who are going to be in this school system next year and the year after that. I think that we need to get to a grassroots movement. We need to. I told the committee, I told everybody here, I have a list of legislation that has been proposed in the areas of funding for special ed, in the unfunded mandates, and several other things. Those issues will have hearings. If people attend the hearings, the state notices. If the people can't attend the hearings, they should write letters. So this is what needs to happen now and ongoing in the months ahead. That is the way to fix it. I personally can't do anything that I determine to be, nobody likes this, but to decline this budget tonight and have to go back to the drawing board, I think would be reckless to the students that are going to be in this school district in September. If anybody wants to know about the 1/12 thing, that's fine, but.
I think you should explain it.
If we don't have a budget that passes, if our budget fails, then we have to come back and we just have 1/12 of what we are already working with. Month to month.
You have the opportunity, if you could figure something out between town meetings in July 1st, you can convene, vote a new budget, send it back to the towns, but the likelihood of a town meeting being reconvened, I would say, is...
Yeah, the towns would have to reconvene another town meeting. So if we look at the big picture and what's best for the students in this district, I think that we need to pass this budget that has been presented and worked on so hard by the people at this table. Again, it's not what anybody wants. Nobody. I can't imagine it. But I think that this is the prudent thing to do at this point. Again, I don't feel that we need to take a step that's going to jeopardize the things for the students that are going to be here in September. Anybody else?
You have a seconded motion on the floor.
Yes, we do. We need to take a vote. On the motion of the general operating budget, all those in favor? Opposed? Okay, thank you. Next, I would like a motion on the capital debt service that the school committee approve an FY16 capital debt service budget as detailed with expenditures totaling $2,814,250, resulting in capital assessments of $149,105 to the town of Newbury, $155,739 to the town of Rowley, and $774,806 to the town of Salisbury.
So moved.
Could we have a second?
I'll second.
Is there any discussion on the capital debt service budget? All those in favor? Opposed? None. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is the district enrollment projection, which we have kind of already talked about. Mr. Farmer, did you want to talk about that?
I'm not sure there's very much more to say.
No.
The intention was simply to inform you of the direction in which we're going.
All right. The high school graduation requirements?
With the committee's permission, I would ask you to table this item. During the past week, we've had discussions about the impact of fewer teachers in the school, and I am certainly concerned that requiring students to take more classes may well result in unintended consequences. And I think it's the wrong time now to pursue the graduation requirements until we've seen how the high school settles down after the reductions that you've just agreed.
Any questions on that? Anybody have any questions for Mr. Farmer? Could we have a motion to table the revised high school graduation requirements?
I'll make a motion to table the revised high school graduation requirements.
Second.
Any further discussion? Paul?
So much have a discussion. I just have a comment, Ms. Farmer. I think it was courageous for you to say that. I think that the whole movement that the committee took recently on the graduation just wasn't really where it needed to be, and I thank you for taking that step.
I should say it was on the recommendation of the principal.
Did we, all those in favor? Sorry. Report of the superintendent of schools.
Thank you. I'll draw attention to one or two things. We have had a discussion about the feasibility of revising the secondary report card in a way that will separate an academic report from a report on the personal and social development of students. We believe that we can make that work in Aspen, and so we continue to work on that. You'll recall that after I withdrew the merger proposal, I came to the committee with some other issues that I felt needed attention, and one of those was to do with trying to align the middle and high school schedules, to alert you to the fact that we are working on that. There will be two benefits. One is that precociously academic students will be able to take classes in the high school, despite the fact there were middle school children, and there may be some flexibility around the best use of personnel. The other thing I'd want to draw your attention to is I met the New England wrestling champion and his coach this afternoon. Want to draw your attention to some silliness. The wrestling champion is a senior, but his coach is not allowed to coach him in the upcoming national competition because that is an MIA regulation, because coaches are not allowed to coach out of season. That really is very, very silly. Given that the young man is a senior, it's not going to affect Triton's wrestling team next year. I think there are a number of things around that we ought to talk to the MIA about. And it hasn't happened yet, but I'm meeting all the principals of the musical tomorrow after school. I join Mrs. Sullivan in saying I thought it was a really quite magnificent, very, very strong performance, and a great credit to everybody who was involved. You've got information on the coordinated compliance review. I've provided you with a reminder of a budget briefing that I sent to Senator Tarr about issues that I personally would like him to work on. And within this, I mention, in fact, it's something that's touched upon in Senator O'Connor Ives' proposals that I've been arguing for a while, that where we have to provide prescribed, planned medical nursing support for students, that should be charged to family insurance, not to us. And Senator O'Connor Ives has taken that up, and my professional association is taking it up as well. I provided you, since I think it's going to be a course célèbre with quite a lot of information here about the charter school issue, which is emerging at the moment. I was going to mention it earlier, but I draw your attention to what the Constitution of the Commonwealth says about public schools. Wisdom and knowledge, as well as virtue, diffused generally among the body of the people, being necessary for the preservation of their rights and liberties, and as these depend on spreading the opportunities and advantage of education in the various parts of the country and among the different orders of people, it shall be the duty of legislatures and magistrates in all future periods of this Commonwealth to cherish the interests of public schools and grammar schools in the towns. And when you think about what we understand by cherish, what are the things that we cherish? The people we love, the heirlooms, the memorabilia around people that we love, things that we get sentimental about, things that we love. It's probably not our motor car or necessarily our house, though we may cherish our home with the people in it. When you think of the power of that word cherish as used in that context, I think that places an enormous responsibility as an ambition for the Constitution back in 1780. I don't think there's anything else that I need to say this evening. If you have questions on the report or other matters, as usual, I'll do my best to answer them.
Any questions for Mr. Farmer? Okay, we have no subcommittee action items. I'm just going to say again, not necessary to the people just in this at the table or in this room, but if anybody is interested in having the dates of the hearings on those legislative proposals that will help the school district, if you get in touch with me when I get those dates, I will be really happy to
Why can't we just post them anyways?
we can post them anyways, yes. So, okay, there we go. So when we get those dates, check the website. As Mr. Farmer said, one of them is a bill to allow medical requirements to be billed to insurances rather than schools having to pay for them. Again, there are also the unfunded mandates are there, and a redo of Chapter 70 also.
Could I just add a footnote to my report? It arises out of a personnel negotiations subcommittee yesterday, and I don't think it's private. But there is an issue around teachers giving up their pay and being within 3 years of their retirement. And the subcommittee did ask me to investigate if there was a way in which we could legally protect the interests of what will be a small number of people whose retirement would be affected down the line. I'm sharing that just for information.
Okay. All right, thank you very much. Well, thank you everybody for coming tonight and making some very tough decisions. Could we have a motion to adjourn this meeting?
I'll make a motion to.
Everybody wants to stay?
I'll second.
Okay. Any discussion? All those in favor? Thank you very much.